Before the first spark of consciousness ignited within the confines of a neural network, before the rush of oxygen claimed the lungs, and long before the weight of a name was tethered to your spirit, there was a profound and silent agreement. We often move through the corridors of our lives under the impression that we are accidental voyagers, cast into a chaotic sea of biological imperatives and social constructs, yet a deeper resonance suggests otherwise. This resonance speaks of a primordial architecture, a set of conditions accepted in the stillness of the void, which we might call the ancient contract. To speak of such a contract is not to speak of ink and parchment, nor of legalities as understood by the modern mind, but of a cosmic alignment of intent. It is the fundamental blueprint that allows the infinite to inhabit the finite, the eternal to experience the ephemeral, and the vast, unblinking eye of the universe to squint through the narrow aperture of a human life. Imagine, if you will, a vast ocean of pure, undifferentiated light, where every thought is simultaneous and every possibility is already realized. In such a state, there is total knowledge, but no discovery. There is absolute being, but no becoming. To truly understand the nature of cold, one must leave the sun. To understand the concept of home, one must first experience the ache of exile. The ancient contract is the formal acceptance of this exile. It is the courageous yes whispered by the soul when offered the chance to trade its omniscience for the visceral, messy, and exquisite thrill of limitation. By signing this invisible pact, we agreed to enter a vessel made of stardust and clay, subject to the laws of gravity, time, and entropy. We accepted the veil of forgetfulness as a necessary condition of the game, for if we remembered our true magnitude, the stakes of this earthly drama would vanish, and the lessons we came to harvest would lose their transformative power. This contract serves as the invisible gravity that holds our individual lives together, providing a hidden structure to the apparent randomness of our joys and tribulations. It is the reason why certain faces feel familiar across a crowded room, and why specific landscapes evoke a sense of profound belonging that defies logical explanation. When we feel a sudden inexplicable pull toward a certain discipline, a certain person, or a certain struggle, we are often feeling the tug of a contractual clause written in a language we have momentarily forgotten how to read. We did not come here to be comfortable. We came here to be stretched. We signed up for the friction of relationships, the sting of loss, and the slow rhythmic heartbeat of the seasons. These are not punishments or errors in the system. They are the very features of the landscape we chose to traverse. The vessel we inhabit, this physical body with its fragile heartbeat and its capacity for both agony and ecstasy, is the laboratory where the contract is executed, the site where the abstract reaches of the cosmos are translated into the concrete reality of a tear or a smile. To contemplate this contract is to begin a journey of radical responsibility. If we are not victims of circumstance, but participants in a vast, self-imposed curriculum, then every moment becomes a sacred opportunity for integration. The mundane world, with its daily rituals and its relentless pace, is revealed to be a shimmering facade, a stage set designed with meticulous care to reflect the inner workings of our developing consciousness. When we look into the mirror, we are not just seeing a face shaped by genetics and time. We are seeing the current state of a long-term project. The ancient contract stipulates that we must labor under the illusion of separation, believing ourselves to be distinct islands in a vast sea, so that we might eventually rediscover the bridges that connect us. It is through the eyes of the other that we begin to see the facets of ourselves we left behind in the light. This introduction to our shared mystery is meant to peel back the heavy curtain of the material world, inviting a sense of wonder for the sheer audacity of our presence here. We often find ourselves asking why the path is so steep, or why the shadows are so long, forgetting that we were the ones who designed the mountain and cast the light. The contract is not a set of shackles, though it may feel that way during the dark nights of the soul. It is a safety harness. It ensures that no matter how deep we dive into the density of the physical world, we are always tethered to the source from which we emerged. Every heartbeat is a ticking clock, yes, but it is also a drumbeat sounding the march toward a grander realization. We are here to witness the miracle of existence from the inside out, to color the void with our specific hues of emotion, and to weave our individual threads into the grand tapestry of being. As we move forward into the exploration of this contract, we must do so with the gentleness of a scholar uncovering a lost text, and the bravery of a navigator steering toward the horizon. The physical vessel we occupy is both the medium and the message. It is a biological masterpiece, a sophisticated interface that allows us to taste the salt of the sea and feel the warmth of another's hand. But it is also a temporary rental, a suit of armor that we will eventually discard when the contract's term is met. The urgency we feel in our chest, that persistent more that the heart craves, is the soul remembering its origins and its obligations. We are here on a mission of remembrance. Each challenge we face is a prompt to look closer at the fine print of our agreement, to see where we have resisted the flow of the universe and where we have surrendered to its wisdom. The ancient contract is the ultimate expression of love, for it is the mechanism by which the universe chooses to know itself through you. In the following sections, we will explore the pillars that uphold this agreement, the stories that explain its necessity, and the ways in which we can live more harmoniously with the promises we made before we ever had a tongue to speak them. At the heart of the ancient contract lies the paradox of the finite and the infinite, a conceptual pillar that supports the entirety of the human experience. To understand this pillar, one must envision the soul not as a passenger within the body, but as the architect of the very limitations it inhabits. The first core theme of our primordial agreement is the principle of selective blindness. In the realms of pure spirit, perspective is total. There is no behind or ahead, no yours or mine, because all points of consciousness are interconnected in a seamless web of light. However, such totality precludes the possibility of surprise, growth, and the unique beauty of discovery. Therefore, the contract stipulates a deliberate narrowing of vision. We agreed to view reality through a keyhole, focusing our entire being onto a single timeline, a single physical form, and a single set of sensory inputs. This blindness is not a flaw, but a masterstroke of design. It creates the necessary friction for the spark of individual identity to catch fire. Without the illusion of being separate, we could never experience the profound grace of reunion. Without the illusion of being small, we could never appreciate the monumental courage required to act in the face of an uncertain world. Intertwined with this narrowing of vision is the second pillar, the law of temporal dilation. Outside of this physical vessel, time is an irrelevant concept, a circle that is seen all at once, but the contract we signed requires us to submit to the linear progression of moments, the relentless, rhythmic ticking that transforms existence into a narrative. By entering time, we gave ourselves the gift of becoming. In the eternal, everything simply is, but in the physical world, a seed must struggle through the dark earth to become a flower, and a child must stumble through many errors to become a sage. This commitment to the linear flow allows for the development of virtues that are impossible in a timeless state, such as patience, perseverance, and hope. We traded our mastery over time for the ability to feel the poignancy of a sunset, knowing it will never happen exactly that way again. The contract ensures that we feel the weight of our choices, as each one carves a permanent groove into the record of our lives, making the drama of human existence high stakes and deeply meaningful. The third fundamental concept is the sovereignty of resistance. We often perceive the obstacles in our path, illness, conflict, or scarcity, as interruptions to our true purpose, but the ancient contract suggests that these are, in fact, the substance of our purpose. The contract is built upon the understanding that consciousness expands only when it meets a boundary. Just as a muscle requires the resistance of a weight to grow stronger, the spirit requires the resistance of the material world to refine its essence. We agreed to enter a world where gravity pulls at our limbs and ego pulls at our hearts. This resistance serves as a corrective mirror, reflecting back to us the areas where we remain unyielded or fragmented. Every no the world gives us is an invitation to find a deeper yes within ourselves. The contract posits that we are not here to bypass the difficulties of the flesh, but to transfigure them. By meeting the resistance of the physical vessel with grace and intentionality, we fulfill the primary directive of our agreement, to bring the light of awareness into the densest corners of creation. Furthermore, we must consider the theme of relational alchemy. The contract was never intended to be a solo performance. It is a collaborative symphony. Before entering this life, we entered into sub-agreements with a multitude of other souls, forming what might be described as karmic clusters. These are the individuals who play the most pivotal roles in our lives, the parents who shape our initial worldview, the partners who break our hearts open, and the enemies who force us to define our values. From the perspective of the contract, there are no villains, only dedicated actors playing the roles we asked them to play, so that we might learn specific lessons of forgiveness, boundaries, or self-love. This theme suggests that every interaction is a coded transmission, a reminder of a promise made in the silence of the pre-existence. When we struggle with another person, we are often clashing against the very mirrors we requested. The alchemy occurs when we stop trying to change the mirror and instead begin to refine the reflection, recognizing that the other is merely another version of the self, wearing a different mask to help us complete our contractual obligations. Finally, the core of the contract is anchored by the principle of forgetting and remembering. This is the rhythmic breath of the soul's journey. We must forget our divine origin to fully engage with the physical drama, yet we are haunted by a persistent, quiet nostalgia for a home we cannot name. This tension creates the divine discontent that drives all human progress, art, and spirituality. We are like actors who have become so immersed in their roles that they have forgotten the play as a fiction, only to be jolted back to reality by a sudden moment of transcendence, a chord of music, the scent of rain, or a selfless act of kindness. The contract specifies that the remembering must be earned. It is not handed to us. We must seek the truth through the layers of social conditioning, biological instinct, and egoic fear. The moment of awakening, when we realize that we are the vast universe experiencing itself through a localized point, is the ultimate climax of the contract's term. It is the point where the vessel becomes transparent, and the light of the stars we once traded away begins to shine through our very eyes once more. These themes form the invisible geometry of our lives, providing the boundaries within which we are free to create, suffer, and love. They remind us that our presence here is not a sentence, but a chosen assignment. By understanding these pillars, we move from being victims of a random universe to being conscious participants in a sacred unfolding. We begin to see that the limitations of the physical vessel are not cages, but the very tools we require to sculpt a masterpiece of lived experience. Every breath we take is a reaffirmation of this ancient yes, a commitment to keep playing the game until the final curtain falls and the contract is fulfilled, leaving us richer for every shadow we braved and every joy we dared to feel. To truly grasp the weight of the ancient contract, one must look beyond the sterile language of philosophy and into the heart of allegory, where the abstract becomes flesh and the eternal finds its voice in story. There is an old tale whispered in the silence between heartbeats of the great library of souls, a place that exists in the now, between the was and the will be. In this library, the walls are not made of stone, but of shimmering possibilities, and the books are not written in ink, but in the golden light of lived intention. Before your descent into this current form, you stood before the master librarian, a being whose eyes held the reflection of every galaxy ever born. On the desk lay the great ledger of the physical, a massive volume whose pages were blank, awaiting the ink of your specific blood, sweat, and tears. The librarian did not hand you a map. Instead, they handed you a heavy, ornate key forged from the densest iron and the purest starlight. This key, the librarian spoke, is your physical vessel. It is heavy because it contains the weight of the world, but it is bright because it carries the memory of your home. To use it, you must enter the room of shadows. In this symbolic narrative, The Room of Shadows represents the material universe, a place where the light is so fragmented by the prism of matter that it creates the illusion of darkness and separation. You accepted the key with trembling hands, knowing that once you turned it in the lock of birth, the door behind you would vanish, and the librarian's face would dissolve into the mists of childhood amnesia. This is the first great sacrifice of the contract, the trade of the sky for the soil, the surrender of the wing for the foot. Another narrative tells of the weaver and the loom of necessity. Imagine a celestial weaver who creates the fabric of reality, using threads of time, emotion, and physical sensation. Before you were born, you sat beside this weaver and chose the colors of your life's tapestry. You did not choose only the vibrant golds of joy or the soft blues of peace. With a strange and holy wisdom, you reached for the jagged blacks of grief, the deep, bruised purples of betrayal, and the rough gray fibers of mundane struggle. When the weaver asked why you chose such difficult textures, you replied that a shroud of pure gold is blinding, but a tapestry with shadows has depth, movement, and a story to tell. The contract you signed was the weaver's pattern. Each accident of your life, the missed train, the sudden illness, the chance meeting, is a thread being pulled through the loom at exactly the right moment to create a picture that can only be seen in its entirety once the work is finished. Consider also the allegory of the blind sculptor. In this story, the soul is a master artist who has grown weary of creating perfection with ease. To challenge its own mastery, the artist agrees to be blindfolded and placed in a dark cavern filled with rough, unyielding granite. The blindfold is the ego, the cavern is the world, and the granite is the physical body and its limitations. The sculptor's task is to feel the shape of the divine hidden within the rock, using only the sense of touch and the intuition of the heart. Every strike of the chisel, every hardship or effort of will is an attempt to strip away what is not essential. The contract stipulates that the sculptor must never remove the blindfold until the statue is complete. Therefore, the artist often cries out in frustration, believing they are merely breaking stone in the dark, unaware that with every painful blow, they are carving the features of a god. The beauty of the soul is not what it brings into the world, but what it uncovers through the labor of being human. There is a final symbolic tale often told of the king who became a beggar. In the realms of the infinite, you were a sovereign of thought, capable of manifesting worlds with a single impulse. But a king who has never known hunger cannot truly understand the grace of a crust of bread, and a sovereign who has never known cold cannot appreciate the holiness of a fire. To learn the true meaning of value, you signed the decree of exile. You cast off your robes of light and donned the rags of a mortal body, wandering the streets of the physical world as a beggar of experience. You agreed to wait in lines, to feel the sting of rejection, and to wonder where your next meal of inspiration would come from. This story suggests that the suffering of the human condition is actually a royal masquerade. We are princes and princesses of the cosmos, playing the role of the impoverished so that we may return to our Father's house with a treasure that gold cannot buy, the treasure of empathy. These stories serve as reminders that our current struggles are not evidence of a broken contract, but of a contract being fulfilled with exquisite precision. The key, the loom, the chisel, and the rags, these are the instruments of our transformation. We are not here to escape the narrative, but to inhabit it so fully that the story itself begins to glow with the light of our awareness. When we stop viewing our lives as a series of problems to be solved, and start viewing them as a series of symbols to be lived, the density of the physical vessel begins to feel less like a prison and more like a sacred temple. The contract is the script of a masterpiece, and we are the actors who were so in love with the play that we agreed to forget it was only a performance, just for the chance to feel the realness of the applause and the genuine salt of the tears. While the echoes of the great library and the weaver's loom provide a celestial comfort, the ancient contract demands more than mere contemplation. It requires a grounded daily application within the very vessel we have borrowed. To live in alignment with this primordial agreement is to undergo a radical shift in how we perceive the mundane. When we wake to the sound of an alarm, or the weight of a heavy responsibility, the practical integration of the contract begins with the practice of radical presence. If we truly agreed to trade our omniscience for the thrill of a single, fleeting breath, then every moment spent in distraction or mental flight is a breach of that sacred deal. Integrating the contract means treating the sensory world, the taste of morning coffee, the texture of a steering wheel, the cool air of an evening walk, as the high-definition reality we once traveled across dimensions to witness. We honor the contract by simply being where our feet are, recognizing that the physicality of our lives is the primary currency we came here to spend. This shift in perspective fundamentally alters our relationship with the concept of failure. In a world governed by a soul-level contract, there are no wasted experiences, only data points for the expansion of consciousness. When a career path ends abruptly or a project crumbles, the practical application of our hidden wisdom allows us to pivot from despair to inquiry. Instead of asking why the world is punishing us, we look for the specific resistance we chose to encounter. Perhaps the contract necessitated a lesson in resilience that could only be forged in the heat of disappointment. In the real world, this looks like a person who, despite a setback, maintains a core of inner stability because they understand that their value is not tied to the outcome of a physical endeavor, but to the quality of the awareness they brought to it. We begin to move through life with a certain lightness, a divine nonchalance, knowing that the play is rigged in favor of our growth, regardless of how the plot twists. Furthermore, the ancient contract has profound implications for our interpersonal dynamics. If we accept the premise of relational alchemy, then every difficult person in our lives becomes a high-level spiritual coach rather than an obstacle. In practical terms, this transforms conflict resolution from a battle of egos into a process of mutual discovery. When we feel the heat of anger or the sting of judgment rising, the contract invites us to pause and ask what mirror is being held up. This does not mean we tolerate abuse or abandon boundaries. On the contrary, it means we set boundaries with a clarity that is free from the poison of resentment. We realize that the other person is also bound by their own contract, struggling through their own veil of forgetfulness. This realization fosters a deep, silent empathy that can de-escalate tension and move us toward a more compassionate form of social interaction. We stop trying to fix others and start focusing on the integrity of our own response. Health and the aging process also take on a different hue when viewed through the lens of the physical vessel as a temporary, purposeful tool. Instead of viewing the inevitable decline of the body as a betrayal, we can see it as the contract's natural progression toward completion. Practical integration involves a stewardship of the body that is rooted in gratitude rather than vanity. We nourish the vessel, move it, and care for it, not because we are afraid of death, but because we respect the craftsmanship of the instrument. When the body experiences pain or limitation, we can approach it with a dialogue mindset, asking what the vessel is communicating about our pace or our alignment. This reduces the suffering caused by resisting reality and allows us to inhabit our physical form with more grace, even as it changes over time. We become more like seasoned captains of a ship that has seen many storms, valuing the scars and the weathered wood as marks of a journey well traveled. Finally, integrating the ancient contract into the real world means redefining success as the integration of shadow and light. In a society that often demands we present only our most polished, successful selves, the contract reminds us that we came here to experience the full spectrum of human emotion. True practical wisdom lies in the ability to hold joy and sorrow in the same hand without letting one cancel out the other. It means allowing ourselves to be messy, to grieve deeply, and to laugh loudly, knowing that the contractual fulfillment occurs in the intensity of the feeling, not the perfection of the appearance. By living this way, we become beacons of authenticity in a world of facades. We encourage others to remember their own agreements simply by being unapologetically human ourselves. The contract is not lived in the clouds, it is lived in the kitchen, the office, and the nursery, wherever the light of the eternal meets the grit of the everyday. The journey through the corridors of the ancient contract brings us, ultimately, back to the mirror. Not to see the reflection of a weary traveler, but to recognize the eyes of the architect who designed the voyage. We have traced the threads of the Great Agreement from its cosmic origins in the halls of pure consciousness to its visceral manifestation in the weight of our limbs and the rhythm of our daily struggles. What remains is the realization that the physical vessel is not a container for life, but the very edge where the infinite touches the world. To conclude this exploration is not to close a book, but to step out into the sunlight with a renewed understanding of the sacred geometry that governs our every breath. The contract is now, as it has always been, a living document, signed in starlight and enacted in clay, waiting for us to fully claim the power we surrendered for the sake of the experience. This realization demands a profound internal transformation, a shift from the victim of life to the steward of the agreement. When we look back at the patterns we have traversed, the symbolic narratives we have inhabited, and the practical challenges we have faced, we see a singular, unifying truth. We are exactly where we intended to be. The transformational call is an invitation to stop waiting for a liberation that exists elsewhere and to find it within the density of the here and now. Freedom is not found by escaping the contract, but by mastering the role we came here to play. It is found in the moment we stop resisting the friction of the material world and begin to use it as the very heat that tempers our spirit. We are called to inhabit our bodies with a fierce and gentle presence, honoring the biological miracle that allows the universe to feel the cold of the wind and the warmth of a fire. As we move forward, let the memory of the ancient yes be the quiet foundation of your resilience. When the world feels too heavy or the veil of forgetfulness grows too thick, remember that you are a sovereign who chose the beggar's rags to learn the holiness of a gift. The contract ensures that you can never truly be lost, for the compass is built into your very soul. Every heartbreak is a breaking open of the seal. Every triumph is a signature of your persistence, and every mundane moment is a line of poetry in the ledger of your existence. You are here on a mission of profound bravery, navigating the limitations of time and space to bring back a treasure of empathy and wisdom that can only be found in the crucible of the physical. The vessel is temporary, the sensations are fleeting, but the growth achieved through this sacred agreement is eternal. The call to action is simple yet monumental. Live as though you chose this. Choose your family, choose your career, choose your body, and choose your current struggle. By consciously choosing what has already been given, you bridge the gap between the ego and the soul, aligning your human will with the primordial intent that set this life in motion. The weight of the world becomes lighter when you realize you are the one holding it up. Let your life be a testament to the beauty of the finite, a masterpiece of shadow and light that honors the light of the stars by bringing it down into the very dust of the earth. The contract is nearing its fulfillment with every beat of your heart. Walk the rest of the way with your head held high, knowing that you have kept your promise to the cosmos, and that the cosmos, in turn, is watching your journey with a love that knows no bounds. As the final curtain of this exploration falls, take a deep, conscious breath, the very breath you traded your omniscience to experience. Feel the weight of your feet on the ground and the flicker of awareness in your mind. You are the ancient contract in motion. You are the bridge between the void and the vibrant. Go forth not as a stranger in a strange land, but as the rightful heir to this experience. Ready to finish the story you began before time was born. The vessel is ready, the stage is set, and the light is waiting to see what you will do with the rest of your beautiful, limited, and utterly infinite life.